Imagine just confidently sitting there, pulling that face. There is something about people who are just like,
hey everybody, I'm Brad Palumbo, and welcome back to the Damage Control Podcast, where we are reclaiming the LGBT community from the crazy people who've taken it over. Today, I'm going to do an in-depth response to a woke trans YouTuber who baselessly speared me as transphobic, and as always, I'll react to some LGBT TikToks at the end. Buckle up and get ready to lose some brain cells with me, but first, hit that like button, don't forget to comment with your thoughts as we go along, and maybe even consider subscribing and sticking around. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So somebody in my audience brought to my attention the fact that a very popular trans YouTuber with more than 1 million subscribers made a video supposedly reacting to transphobic TikToks and featured me not once, but twice. This came as a surprise to me because I actually have pretty moderate centrist takes on trans issues, but apparently this guy thinks I'm a big transphobe. We're gonna watch the video today and address some of his points. Here's the first bit where he's looking at a video that I posted to TikTok reacting to a woke TikTok.
Y'all know J.K. Rowling is a transphobe, right?
No.
I see so many people on here still supporting Harry Potter.
imagine just confidently sitting there, pulling that face and going, no, J.K. Rowling's not transphobic. On what basis? Please do show me things that she has said that are in any way trans supportive and not transphobic. And honestly, at this point, anybody who willfully just says,
J.K. Rowling is not transphobic,
I can think there is only one reason for that, and that is because you are also transphobic. But I do think if you can sit there and legit say that tweeting to like 14 million people that trans women aren't women is not transphobic, then you clearly have some transphobic views going on yourself as well, because trans women are women. And just there is something about people who are just like,
There's a lot to respond to here, but first, you can make fun of my facial expressions if you want. I know they're a bit goofy sometimes. I don't really take offense to that, and I'm not going to respond in kind. I'm not going to talk about your looks or your expressions or anything like that, because honestly, I just don't find it constructive or worthwhile. And it's interesting that this YouTuber flashed 2 examples on screen of news headlines supposedly proving that J.K. Rowling is transphobic. One of those was an article quoting J.K. Rowling saying she would gladly go to jail to defy Scotland's new law that criminalizes misgendering, calling a trans person a pronoun or a gender that they don't align with. But that's not about hating trans people. That's about standing up to Orwellian and dystopian governmental censorship. She's just standing up for free speech. That's not inherently hateful at all. The other one that he flashed as an example was J.K. Rowling replying no to a post that said, trans women are women. Now, is that transphobic? I guess I find that to be an interesting question. I mean, firstly, it's just true that trans woman and woman are not synonyms. They're not the same thing. They are different things. Of course, that doesn't make a trans woman a bad thing to be. It's just definitionally different than a woman. Also, this guy seems to put the onus on us to like prove she's not transphobic when actually you're the one making the claim. It's really on you to prove it, not on us to prove a negative. And regardless, all of this kind of raises the question of what exactly does this person mean by transphobia? To me, transphobia means hatred or disdain towards or for transgender people, aka calling them slurs, defaming them as a group of people, or otherwise treating them cruelly. But merely disagreeing with the idea of the transgender movement and its redefinition of gender that until just a few years ago basically no one believed, is that what transphobia means to you? Is it just a disagreement? I guess this person could count J.K. Rowling's statement as transphobic if by transphobic what they mean is disagrees with me and doesn't really believe that people can change sex or that gender is self-ID, is just a sense of expression, is actually a different thing from sex. If somebody fundamentally disagrees on those points, and maybe that's what this person means by transphobia. But if by transphobia you mean hatred, well then just disagreement does not qualify and should not qualify. For me, it all depends on whether this disagreement is coming from a good faith place of honestly just having different values or disagreeing, or whether it's motivated by genuine animus, which it sometimes can be. The question of homophobia and the gay community gives us a good example here. I don't believe that anybody who, for example, disagrees with gay marriage is inherently homophobic, because what I consider homophobia to mean is genuine hatred or animus towards gay people. Merely disagreeing isn't inherently hateful, but sometimes the way that people disagree and the thing that's motivating their disagreement is in fact hateful. But that's not always the case, and not everyone who disagrees with us, even on things that are really important to us, is just an evil bigot. And frankly, that's kind of a childish way to look at the world. But it sounds like this trans YouTuber really does define transphobia to just mean disagrees with him.
Yay! And I'm like, you realize that the author is a transphobe. Like, she actively says the most horrendous, horrifying, disgusting things about trans people, specifically trans women. How do you still support it? How do you still perform that music? How do you still read those books? How do you still watch this shit? How do you still talk about Harry Potter?
Sorry, I paused it mid-eye roll. I'm struggling to focus on what the person he's reacting to is saying because I'm just looking at his facial expressions. And I'm like, if there is a way to be patronizing by just using your eyebrows, this guy is doing it. I'm very interested to see if he's going to talk at some point to share why he thinks that she's not transphobic.
You know that she actively is doing things to hurt the LGBTQ community. I love those things. I love the whole franchise. But I can't support it because it hurts my siblings. I can't. How do you do this? How do you do that? Do you just not know? Are you just willfully ignorant? Are you trying to say, like, separate the artist from the art? What?
I am so tired.
Me too.
You notice how when they make these little videos, they never actually mention anything J.K. Rowling has had to say about any of this?
It's really not difficult to find, but if this person is interested, here's an entire video I literally just made breaking down not even all of what she said that is actively transphobic and explaining why it's transphobic. In a short, it's very difficult to go through exactly what she's done because it's a lot.
That's because her position on trans issues is pretty centrist. It's pretty moderate. She fully respects the rights and autonomy of transgender adults.
The last time she said something like that I've seen was like 4 years ago, and she's actively donated to protest causes that go against the rights of trans adults. Okay, well, I'm sorry that you haven't really kept up with J.K. Rowling's commentary, but that's not my problem. Just last year, she did a really extensive audio documentary with the Free Press called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, which I thought was phenomenal, where she gave hours and hours and hours of interviews explaining her views in depth on this stuff. I listened to the entire thing twice, and I can tell you that while I don't even fully agree with all of her views, I did not get the sense that she was somebody who has genuine hatred or animus towards trans people. And I did get the sense that she still supports trans adults' right to live however they want. She's just deeply concerned about the protection of sex-based rights for women and women's only spaces, and she's alarmed by the transgender movement's attempt to deny and erase biology and invade women's spaces and infringe on women's rights in some cases. And I don't think she's crazy to be concerned by that. Now, the cause that he cited about her donating to causes that oppose trans rights, it's actually significantly more complicated than that. What she opposed was an attempt to redefine woman under law to solely be subject to self-ID. Instead, the group she supported was advocating to maintain the approach from the 2010 Equality Act in Scotland, which treated trans women and women as distinct but equal categories, and would still allow for trans women to be excluded from women's only spaces in some circumstances, which J.K. Rowling views as necessary in things like sexual assault crisis shelters and women's sport and that kind of thing. And again, I don't think that's hateful. I think that's commonsensical in many ways. Disagree with J.K. Rowling and that cause and that movement if you want, but it's not just pure bigotry. It's not that simple. This stuff is a lot more complicated than that. She's not the witch these folks have made her out to be. Not at all. But even if she was, like this dude hints at the end, you should be able to separate the art from the artist. Not necessarily, because supporting the art therefore supports the artist, and actually being involved in something that is created by and has somebody so heavily involved with who has caused harm is a very difficult thing to do. I can't look at Harry Potter stuff in the same way that I used to, because I'm just like, oh, JK Rowling. It just doesn't sit right with me. I don't judge people who can privately enjoy it, but I'm not interested in interacting or following people who have a platform and actively share. Even if they like will say, I know JK Rowling's transphobic, but here's me going to Harry Potter World, I'm not there for that. And I think people who sit there and are like, show me the evidence, it's like the evidence is out there, just Google it. Like, if you're asking for people to provide that to you, that means that you've not even tried to look into it yourself, right? So how can you sit there and so confidently say that she isn't transphobic and she hasn't done these things when you're requesting proof that she has? So that means you've not looked into it, because honestly, a simple Google search of like JK Rowling trans views will tell you everything you need to know. And there's very many videos out there that break it down. How can you expect every single person who makes a short video to break it down? Oh, for people to sit there and like with their whole chest go,
JK Rowling's not transphobic.
either you are transphobic or you've just literally not read anything that she said for the past 4 or 5 years.
First, this refusal to separate the art from the artist is just so dumb. I just can't enjoy the art of anyone who has problematic views because I don't want to support them. Okay, babe. Congrats on never being able to read any classic literature, watch any film made before 2020. I mean, you're just limiting yourself. Basically, everybody that we read and we think about and who's created great works of culture that wasn't doing so just like this year or a couple years ago held views about race, sex, gender, sexual orientation, all of these things that you would find deeply problematic. It's such a small-minded and ignorant way of looking at the world to intentionally close yourself off to art and thought and culture created by people just because on one area that's important to you, they disagree in some fundamental way. If you can't see how intellectually isolating and frankly just how dull that all is, I don't know how to help you see it. Now, for the accusation that I didn't take the time to Google J.K. Rowling's alleged transphobia, no, babe. The video you're reacting to is a clip from this podcast where I have done entire episodes diving deep into exactly what J.K. Rowling has said on these issues and whether it is, in fact, transphobic. The reason I'm asking for proof is because I have looked at what is routinely cited and found it not compelling. Not because I haven't looked, babe. Anyway, you can just call me transphobic again if you want, but that doesn't actually advance your point or argument or make you right. Plus, if people who hold my moderate views on gender are now transphobic, then y'all have officially watered down that term to the point of absolute meaninglessness. And that's actually sad, because then it kind of destroys and neuters our ability to actually identify and distance ourselves from the Matt Walshes of the world, the actual transphobes who genuinely hold animus towards trans people. Anyway, so I actually thought that this trans YouTuber ended his commentary on me after this TikTok was done and he moved on to reacting to other TikToks. But it turns out I actually featured twice in his video and he comes back to me later in the video.
This might actually be Dylan Mulvaney's
Oh, do I want to watch another video from this guy?
worst take of all time. Watch.
Like the articles written about me using he pronouns and calling me a man over and over again. And I feel like that should be illegal. I don't know. That's just bad journalism.
It's disrespectful. You're misgendering somebody. It's hateful towards trans people. It's discriminatory. I'm pretty sure, did a law not just literally pass the other day in Scotland that made misgendering a crime? It says online misgendering could be investigated in Scotland under new hate crime law.
So, look, I'm glad you're at least being open and honest and letting your dystopian authoritarian freak flag fly proudly. You actually seem to agree that it should be illegal for newspapers to write things that hurt people's feelings. Wow. Personally, call me crazy, I believe in freedom, and I want the right to express ideas that other people find offensive or controversial for myself, so I support that right for others. It's called being logically consistent, my friend. And maybe you don't get it because you're not American, but this isn't Scotland. This isn't England. Your dystopian bullshit doesn't fly here. We have a First Amendment, and we're not giving it up. And frankly, we don't give a flying what you think about it. We actually fought a war against y'all, so we didn't have to live under your tyranny. And we do not have any regrets about that, babe. Now, obviously, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but I do want to talk seriously about this for a second, this question of freedom of press and freedom of speech as it relates to misgendering and debates over gender issues. Because, and I actually made this point in the video that Jamie's responding to, but he didn't really grapple with it. Radical trans activists like Jamie, of all people, should understand how important it is for minority views that some people find controversial or offensive to nonetheless be protected under freedom of speech and freedom of press. Because until literally just a few years ago, the views that Jamie holds on gender were rejected by 95+% of society, both in the US and in the UK. And under the framework that Jamie and Dylan seem to be endorsing, the advocates who have actually been somewhat successful in getting a chunk of society, at least, to get on board with this gender ideology, they could have been censored very early on because their opinions were upsetting and offensive to people, offensive to women, redefining womanhood, dangerous to society, all these other things, and they could have been shut down and censored. I mean, you made an entire video about how evil and transphobic J.K. Rowling and apparently people like me are. Maybe we find that offensive and disrespectful and upsetting, just like Dylan finds these articles. So, by your own logic, you shouldn't be legally allowed to publish that YouTube video. Do you see the problem yet? Have you really not thought this through?
So a lot of Dylan's content is cringe, but I try not to hate on Dylan too much.
Try not to hate on Dylan too much. I hate on Dylan just the right amount.
But this one I have to speak out against because it's so dangerous and antithetical to the First Amendment. Newsflash, Dylan, a free press has the right to misgender you or call you by a different name or say whatever they want about you.
Or say whatever they want about you. I think what people often forget about free speech is that it does not mean free of consequence. You can say whatever you want. Someone's not literally putting a gag on your mouth or taking away your computer from like writing an article, but you saying certain things will come with certain consequences. And that's not taking away free speech, but that's just saying, hey, if you say things that go into the realm of discrimination and hate, then there will be consequences to that.
Okay, now I honestly just feel embarrassed for this dude. He should have done some basic research and educated himself on free speech, at least the basics, before going and making a fool of himself and just sounding so ignorant. You're not having your free speech infringed just because there's consequences. Actually, when we're talking governmental consequences from the state, which Dylan was, right, making this illegal, that is literally the definition of a violation of free speech, babe. I mean, by this logic, and I'm being incredibly generous even calling it that, the government could imprison journalists who write negatively about a certain politician, and, well, they're not being prohibited from typing up their article and writing on their laptop. They're just facing consequences. Bruh. I mean, maybe educate yourself, at least a little bit, on these matters before you just pop off on YouTube when you have 1 million subscribers. Just a thought. That's just my suggestion for you.
And if you want your friendly press to have the right to refer to you by your preferred pronouns and write good things about you, you've got to support both. Also, somebody as controversial as Dylan Mulvaney should understand the value in free speech because a lot of people find Dylan's content deeply offensive and objectionable. If offensive stuff is going to be censored, newsflash, Dylan, that might mean you.
And you think that Dylan isn't receiving significantly more backlash for just being herself and speaking about trans topics than these articles and these journalists are for literally misgendering her and discriminating against her as a transgender woman. There's a difference between saying something that offends people based on opinion, and then there's saying something that is, one, factually incorrect, and two, discrimination.
Oof, there is a lot here. First, yes, Dylan Mulvaney has received a lot of backlash and pushback and criticism for her content, but at least as far as I'm aware, she's faced absolutely no governmental sanction or consequences from the state or punishment or censorship of any kind. In fact, she's been praised and elevated by our government like Joe Biden. But if she did face those kinds of consequences, I would be absolutely out here speaking out and defending her rights. But she hasn't, so I'm not really sure what your point is supposed to be. It's also honestly just kind of bizarre to claim that using pronouns that correspond to biology, not self-defined gender identity, is factually incorrect. You can't just declare your opinion factually correct and then claim that anybody else is making factually untrue statements if they disagree with you. Like, that's not how this works. Plus, people who hold the opposite view as yours think that it is factually incorrect to refer to Dylan Mulvaney as she, her. Under your exact logic, do you want them making that illegal in red states, for example? And that's the main thing here. He never addressed my main argument, that a government powerful enough to compel people to use the correct pronouns in your view is a government powerful enough to prohibit you from using the pronouns that you want to use for transgender people. You can't have the best of both worlds. Do you want a government that tells people what they're allowed to say, or do you want to live in a free society? I know where I fall on that question, but it's up to you to decide where you do. But I'll just tell you that allowing the government to crush offensive or minority viewpoints like this isn't going to work out very well for people who hold extreme fringe minority views about gender like you do, Jamie.
I get being mad about articles you don't like, but don't support censorship.
Yes, I sighed. It's tiring. This person's views are tiring.
All right, well, I'm sorry that you find my arguments tiring. But imagine how exhausting you would find them if you actually understood or engaged with them at all. Now, after my audience brought this video to my attention, I actually emailed Jamie directly and asked him if he wanted to come on my channel or have some sort of constructive dialogue or debate on these questions. I'm sure this will shock you, but I haven't heard back and it has been a few days, but I will keep you guys updated if I do hear something and if we are going to put something together. Yet, assuming Jamie doesn't respond, I think that's pretty telling. It was easy for him to take tiny sound bites from my TikTok account and then make fun of my face and kind of talk past what I was actually saying. But actually engaging with me face to face would most likely expose his ignorance on these subjects and his lack of critical thinking. So I'm not surprised he wants to avoid that kind of constructive dialogue. Now, I will link to the full video that Jamie made in the description, and feel free to go watch it, feel free to go comment, but please keep it constructive, keep it substantive, and do not bully or harass Jamie or anyone else in any way. I don't support that, and I don't want my audience engaging in that.
I'm Ron Burgundy. You stay classy, San Diego.
Anyway, let me know what you think of this whole YouTube drama and him calling me out and my response. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're watching us on YouTube and consider subscribing if you haven't yet. Hey guys, Brad cutting in here to let you know that if you want more of my content, head over and check out the Based Politics podcast on your podcast platform or on YouTube. We just wrapped a recording on another great episode.
That's right, guys. This week, Congress has been busy ruining our lives. They just sent more of your money overseas. There were school choice shenanigans going down in Tennessee. Biden's bringing back Me Too mobs on campuses. And a viral TikTok sparks a debate about getting a job with tattoos.
For all that and much more, head over and check out the Based Politics podcast on wherever you tune into podcasts or on YouTube. It's time for everybody's favorite part of the podcast, where I subject myself to torture and react to TikToks from the LGBT community. Buckle up and get ready to lose some brain cells with me, because we got some doozies on deck for today.
I don't have a problem with LGBTQ+, but I don't think kids at that age should be knowing or celebrating that yet, honestly, but still, no problem with LGBTQ+. Hello, apostrophes, fairy gay father here with a simple question. Why not? Let me get this gay. Somebody answer this. What is the fear? Because no one in the legitimate quad premium is pushing for adult content. Kids learning we exist does two things. Kids that are rainbow sprinkles have a better chance at acceptance, and kids that are not will have a better chance at being accepting. Why is it okay for kids to only learn about heterosexuality? It's not, so follow for more gayness.
I'm gonna try to separate the message of this video from the unusual presentation and focus more on the message. So for me, it does depend how young the kids we're talking about are. Are we talking about, 8th graders who will have romantic relationships going on and some of them might be gay or starting to figure out that they might be gay? Or are we talking about 5-year-olds or 3-year-olds in preschool? And yes, I'm not making that up. some woke people really are teaching pronouns to preschoolers. Assuming we're talking about the latter scenario, I think it's perfectly reasonable, even for people who are perfectly fine with LGBT people, to not want kids talked to about sexual orientation or gender identity or very confusing and complex topics that involve adult stuff that they can't understand at that young age. I do think we have to separate gender and sexual orientation a little bit here. Because personally, I see nothing wrong with even very young kids understanding and being allowed to know or told or observe that some people have two moms, some people have two dads, and that that's a thing that exists. And I agree that that's not going to turn any kids gay or anything like that. There's nothing to worry about that. They either will be or they won't. And whether they're told about it when they're 4 or 5 or kept in the dark isn't going to change that. Trust me, that's not how that works. With the gender identity and the pronoun stuff, I worry more about exposing really young, impressionable kids to it at all because frankly, a lot of it, like the non-binary stuff, is incoherent and confusing even to us adults. And kids that age are so impressionable, and with something that really is just kind of vague and hard to pin down, it's just a sense of feeling, you could confuse them into thinking that they are non-binary or that they're not a girl because they don't like dolls or whatever. And I think that is something that should be avoided, and there is some harm there. I also have to push back on this guy's point that no one is pushing adult content, by which he means explicit, sexually explicit content on kids. I agree that most normal LGBT people aren't doing that, and I'm sure you're not doing that. You seem like nice, I guess. But I will say some people are. Some of the books that they're defending, having in middle schools, for example, have openly sexually explicit demonstrations or depictions and depict sex acts, discuss kinks and fetishes, and go into great detail about using hookup apps and all of this stuff. That is in some of the LGBT books that are being defended and pushed in schools by the LGBT activist community. So you can't just deny that that's happening entirely because, I'm sorry, it is. Although I will agree it's not representative of most LGBT people or something that your average everyday gay person or even trans person is actively concerned about or trying to do. Up next, we've got another update from the neopronoun people.
So this is a video for neopronoun users to duet. Or, if you're considering neopronouns for yourself, maybe even try a blind react. However, safety first. Before you do either of those things, make sure you're in a mental state where if you do get misgendered, you will be okay. Alright, are you ready? Let's get started. Do you see this person next to me? E is my friend. C has had to put up with a lot to get to where Per is today. I just want to let Glint know that Thon is valid, that verb pronouns are valid, and that Sarah identity is valid.
Is it though?
I wish Void all the best, and look forward to maybe even seeing some of their lovely content someday. Please, treat them with respect, and I'm sure A will respect you too. So how did that feel? Are there any neopronouns that stuck out to you that you might want to use for yourself?
No.
Good luck on your pronoun journey.
So the reason I wanted to include this one is because it was on Instagram Reels, and on Instagram, baby girl, the comments section is not nearly as woke as on TikTok, so they were not having it. One person said, "As a gay man, I speak for true gay and lesbian people. Remove us from your liberal alphabet soup. We work too hard to get mixed up in your melted crayon soup." Another person said, "I don't like how gays are getting grouped into this. Gays try to show you how we are like everyone else and deserve to be treated the same because we love the same gender. Please reference all gay movements ever. This neopronoun confusion is trying to show how these people are different and they demand respect for it, which nobody can really get behind because it isn't inclusive. It's actually causing exclusion since the possibilities for additional pronouns seem endless and nobody can keep up with this." Finally, this guy commented, "How do you delete someone else's post?" Yeah, look, I agree with the general thrust of these comments. The neopronoun thing is incoherent. Those words aren't even pronouns. They're not even words. You're trying to destroy our language and play a weird game of mental and linguistic make-believe that nobody's playing, babe. We're not playing this game. And you need to stop tying it to gays and lesbians because you're dragging us down. You are the hole in the bottom of the Titanic and the ship is sinking. Up next, I actually, at least in part, agree with this trans TikTok.
Males need to be banned from girls' bathrooms, and I don't care what anybody says.
Genuine question. If I walked into a woman's bathroom, how do you think the woman would respond? Do you think they would be scared? Do you think they would be uncomfortable? Do you think they might call someone, a police officer, a security guard, anything like that? Probably they would be, and that would be awful, and I would never want women to feel that way, which is why, as a transgender man, I use the men's restroom. What a lot of transphobic people fail to consider when they're talking about trans people in bathrooms is that it's so much more than just the biology, it's the social aspect of it. It's the way that you are perceived. Because regardless of whether you actually think I'm a man or not, maybe you just think I'm a woman, I am perceived as a man. Whether you like it or not, I am perceived at large as a man if someone doesn't know that I'm trans. That's the first thing they're gonna think. So if you actually care about things like women feeling safe, women feeling comfortable, why would you want me in the women's restroom? Probably because you actually don't care and you're just a transphobe trying to hide your prejudice under protecting women. What else is new?
So I actually agreed with a lot of the things he was saying in this TikTok until the end. I don't think people who have concerns about males or people who still appear as men going into women's bathrooms, I don't think they're all bigots or hateful. I think some of them have legitimate concerns in good faith. That said, I do agree that it makes no sense to simply force everyone to use the bathroom aligned with their birth sex because people like this exist. Trans men who pass and trans women who pass, and you're actually creating a whole nother uncomfortable can of worms for everybody involved if you force them into the opposite gender bathroom. It would make women uncomfortable to see this trans guy who passes as a dude in their bathroom, the same way it would if they saw Buck Angel there or something like that. Now, I do agree that it's a problem if trans people who don't at all pass or aren't even making any effort to pass just start going into the opposite bathroom. I'm not exactly sure how we square this circle, but a one-size-fits-all rule that doesn't leave space and grace for genuine trans people who pass or at least very much try to doesn't work either. In fact, you then end up with people who maybe are a female but just look masculine getting harassed and the cops called on them because there's a man in the women's room. It opens up all these cans of worms. So I do think we need to approach this issue with nuance and not just fall into black and white thinking on either extreme. Up next, this trans TikToker actually seems kind of based.
Tells you that they're transgender, believe them. A lot of people will say that it's impossible for a 4-year-old.
Why is it always people that don't have kids that are speaking for children? I'm trans and I've been a stepmother for the last 2 years. He's 5 now and has no idea that I'm transgender. He's not ready for that conversation and we don't plan to tell him for a very long time until he's old enough to understand. 5-year-olds believe Santa Claus exists. And the fact you can sit there and tell me a 3, 4, 5-year-old is mentally competent enough to transition is insane and borderline predatory. I'm thankful I waited until I was an adult because as a child, I would not have been mentally ready for how serious a transition is. What baffles me is that these radicals think that transitions are so normal and not a big deal. My stepson, for example, loves pink and loves Barbies. And trust me, I'm all for breaking gender norms, but none of that means that he's trans. These people think children must medically transition to be validated, but they want grown men to be validated even without a transition whatsoever. Wild. It's not safe or morally ethical to allow children to transition. Let kids be kids.
Apparently this person, whose name is Eden the Doll, is a big trans personality. I wasn't really familiar with her, but I appreciate her speaking out. I also find the idea that we should just believe whatever a 5-year-old tells us about their identity, frankly, laughable. As anybody who works with kids knows, they'll tell you that they are a fairy or a firefighter or whatever. Like, they have all sorts of fanciful notions and they can't actually comprehend complicated adult subjects like sex and gender. And I wanted to include this video to remind you guys that a lot of trans people are perfectly normal and are not out to get kids or are predatory in any kind of way, and that when we see these extreme types online engaging in this kind of behavior, we should never hold it against an entire category of people. But what do you think? Which of these TikToks did you enjoy? Did you enjoy watching me lose brain cells, at least from some of them? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button and maybe even consider subscribing and sticking around. And with that, I'll see you all next week.